One thing that I've told friends and family over the past year is that E's cancer diagnosis was a big wake-up call for myself and Eric. And this is despite the fact that E's cancer was driven by an inherited genetic mutation. So as you can tell, this video is not at all about flower farming. Instead, it's about something much more important, and that is health, because without our health, we have nothing. And so I want to talk about what I've learned over the past year, specifically as it pertains to dispelling some of the beliefs and assumptions that Eric and myself personally had on how we were living a healthy lifestyle. We have done things right in the sense that we cook at home, we try to cook healthy. Of course, we indulge every here and then. We work out pretty religiously, at least 5 to 6 days a week with resistance training, high intensity training through something called CrossFit. We are checking a lot of the boxes that mainstream medicine tells us to do. But what I've learned is that we are in a world today where there's more access to over-the-counter tests and tools that can allow us to take a more personalized approach, and that the advice given to you about a specific diet to follow, even a specific medication to take, may not be the same right advice for the person sitting next to me. And that's because we are all unique in our composition, our DNA makeup. And the reason why this video is dropping now is because there is a relevancy to timing. And one of the most important tests that had a profound impact on how I look at my health and what I do with it is called epigenetics testing. And many of the companies out there that provide this test are having the only sale of the year that I have, which is during Black Friday. I'm not getting any compensation for the stuff that I'm talking about, but rather hoping I can provide those of you out there who have things that have gone undiagnosed, or you are not seeking relief from traditional medicine, to be able to help you point you towards the right direction. And I just want to say that I'm, of course, not a medical practitioner. You should not use what I'm saying here as medical advice, but rather as additional information to help educate yourself. You saw me make eggs for breakfast, and I'm going to explain why eggs are now a mainstay for us. But first, I want to talk about epigenetics. So grab a cup of coffee, because this stuff is a little bit dense. I'm going to try to break it up into as digestible pieces as I can that feel relevant. And I just want to say, 'tis the season for holiday mugs. It's one of my favorite times of year, and these mugs make me so happy. All right, so now that I've had my cup of coffee here, let's talk about epigenetics. When we talk about genetics, there's two pieces to understand. The first is that we all inherit certain genes that don't change. My hair color is black. My eye color is dark brown. These are all basic genetic blueprint that is fixed. You're not going to change it. Epigenetics, though, is different, because epigenetics is the way that your body reads your genes and how the environment can actually turn on or off without changing the DNA itself. So it's really the influence of your environment and lifestyle choices that have on whether or not certain genes are going to express or not express, aka turn on or off. Think about having like switches and dimmers on top of that genetic blueprint. We now have this over-the-counter type of testing, the epigenetics testing, that is a simple cheek swab. You put it into a tube, you mail it in, and whatever company processes the results will give you a pretty comprehensive report. And at the end of this video, I'll talk about some companies that I recommend and not affiliated with. But because it's a cheek swab, it means that really anyone can do it. In fact, E was about 20 months when we did this, and it wasn't at all hard to do. These tests, I just want to emphasize, don't diagnose anything, but they can help us understand how the body processes nutrients, stress, toxins, so that we can support these pathways better, and it's going to look different for everyone. And the analogy that I want to give to you that's going to be relatable is seeds. So think of your genes like a seed. Now, let's say a zinnia seed here as an example. When I plant a zinnia seed, that zinnia seed can only grow to be a zinnia. It cannot grow to be a Cosmo or a tomato. It's going to be a zinnia. But the health and how that zinnia plant grows is going to be heavily dependent on environmental conditions. For example, if I put it in the shade, the zinnia is not going to grow very well. If there's too much water, if there's not enough water, it's also going to compromise growth. Obviously, we know that plants thrive in certain conditions, and different plants are going to do better in the cold versus in the heat. This is very applicable when we talk about epigenetics. And so therefore, the lifestyle, the food that we eat, our stress levels, our sleep, our exercise, our environment, you can think of that as like the soil and the climate part of this analogy. And that's why in the world of functional medicine, there's a saying, which is that genetics loads the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. And I think that there's a bit of debate as to how far you take this. I will say personally, as someone who is not religious, you have to believe that saying to a certain degree to feel like that there is hope, especially for a type of mutation that E has, which puts her at a much higher risk of cancer throughout her lifetime. And therefore, the choices that she makes, especially the lifestyle choices, are going to have a significant impact because her body just doesn't have the buffer that most normal people have in order to take on certain toxins and things like that. Let's bring this to life now, because you're probably saying this is really interesting, but give me some concrete examples. I want to walk through 3 different genes, or they're really called SNPs, SNPs, or single nucleotide polymorphisms, but you don't have to know the terminology. We'll call them genes. These are 3 types that you'll definitely see on any epigenetics report, but these are the ones that are most commonly focused on first because they can address a lot of issues that people may have that have just not been resolved. So the first one is called MTHFR, and I feel like MTHFR has gotten a lot more popularity over the last few years. And the way you can think about this is that at the cellular level, the MTHR gene is like a blender that turns folate, which is a B vitamin, into its more active, usable form that your body needs. So if you have a variant, that blender just runs at a lower speed, and for some people it runs at a snail's pace speed, which means that you need a lot more support from either nutrition or supplementation to make that blender run as fast as it needs to. When we talk about what that symptom can look like if you have one of these variants, it's lower energy, headaches, slower recovery, feeling more sensitive to stress. And I know that these sound like very common types of side effects and conditions that people have from many different things. But I want to highlight that most people actually have some level of a variant with MTHFR. And in our family, all 3 of us carry the same variant. It's C677T. And for us, ours runs at a 65% efficiency. So basically the enzyme stability and efficiency is compromised by about 35%. And the implication for that is that we're going to need more folate-rich foods, as well as something called methylated B vitamins if we're not getting enough B vitamins through our food. If you drill down even further into other parts of your epigenetics report, you might find that you can process things like synthetic folic acid, or you may not be able to. And so that has huge implications because a lot of things are fortified with folic acid. When you're pregnant, we're often told to take folic acid, which is definitely necessary, but the type of folic acid that you take might actually be really important here depending on how your body processes it. So some people need a more expensive type in order for their body to process it. And if you have too much synthetic folic acid, it's actually going to do more harm than good. So again, very generic types of side effects, but if you have headaches, tiredness that feels just chronic, you can't figure out what it is, highly recommend you do some epigenetics testing to peek under the hood. But let's actually go back to the eggs that I made this morning. So we now have 2 eggs daily because eggs are a super nutrient dense type of food, and they provide a decent amount of a nutrient called choline. So all of us need a little bit more choline because of this MTHFR mutation. At the end of the day, if you want to look more into this, look into something called methylation. Very complex topic. There are different types of nutrients that can help convert into either folate or maximize the pathway that doesn't necessarily need folate. So I'm not going to get into that. But the point is that there are certain types of nutrients that you might need to have more than the average person in order to compensate for the variant that you have. All right, so now that we've talked about MTHFR, let's talk about COMT, and that is like a stress reset gene. So a good analogy is that COMT clears your body of stress chemicals like adrenaline and dopamine. It's like a broomstick that sweeps up after a stressful event. So when you have a variant, the sweeping still works, but it can either sweep more slowly or sweep more quickly. And more quickly is actually not necessarily good. So in real life, that can show up as you're just always stuck on the on mode, like feeling over-energized, difficulty calming down, being more sensitive to caffeine, mood swings. So I personally do not have the COMT variant, nor do people, nor do E and Eric. But if you do, supplementing with magnesium really does help. The reason why I wanted to point this one out is because I see this as a common variant that shows up in people who are looking for more answers. And there is definitely a higher prevalence of people with ADHD having a COMT variant. So again, something to look into if this sounds like something that you are struggling with. And then the last one I want to talk about is PON1, which is like a detox and protective shield for the body. PON1 helps neutralize certain chemicals, pesticides, and oxidized fats, so like fried foods. At the cellular level, it acts like a shield that protects your cells. And if you have a variant, the shield is still there, but it may not be as strong. So in daily life, that could manifest as being sensitive to certain fragrances or chemicals. You could have skin irritation. You could benefit from eating more antioxidants like fruits and berries. And you could probably switch out certain types of cleaning products to be a little bit more safe for your body if you have a PON1 variant. So this is especially important for people with genetic mutations. So when I say genetic mutation, I think the most commonly known one for cancer is like BRCA1 and 2. The one that E has is called Li-Fraumeni syndrome, which is a TP53 mutation, but there's also like Lynch syndrome, FAP. There's honestly so many out there, so that if you have any type of mutation or autoimmune disease, I would definitely recommend epigenetics testing to also look at your PON1 pathways. So for us, what that means is E's variant means that her enzyme works at a much slower speed, and therefore the antioxidant defenses rely more heavily on nutrient and environment because that gene isn't running at 100%. For us, we do prioritize our grocery budget to allow for an abundance of berries, which any toddler likes: raspberries, strawberries, blueberries, blackberries. You guys know how expensive they are, and we prioritize as a part of our grocery bill to be able to afford that for her because we know that it is good for her, in addition to the fact she will willingly eat it. But the other thing is that you saw me earlier, I was cooking on a stove, and that stove was an induction stove. So earlier this year, we replaced a relatively new gas stove with induction because gas stoves obviously emit certain pollutants, which we know that E is less likely or is less efficient at detoxifying. So we are trying our best to remove certain variables that are within our control to be able to allow her body to do what it needs to function at its maximal level. And of course, switching out an induction oven is not a cheap thing. This was a few $1,000s because we actually had to put in some new electrical and things like that. But for us, it was a high priority because of obviously what E was going through. These are just 3 examples of the hundreds, maybe even thousands of things you can dive into an epigenetics report. We got this done last year around this time, and I still reference back to that epigenetics report. I have done multiple other types of testing that have also been important, but for me, if there's any test I would definitely recommend prioritizing, it's this one, because it is a blueprint that helps guide you make a lot of different lifestyle decision choices. So let's talk about companies that you can do this with. There are like dozens of companies. Literally just Google epigenetics testing and you'll see what I'm talking about. I'm sure many of them are running deals this holiday season. The two that I want to highlight are Nutrition Genome and 3x4. So Nutrition Genome is the one that I chose to go with. It's a little bit more expensive than 3x4, but I like the output of the data that it was going to give you. So both of these websites, you can download a sample report to see what you're going to get. And I would say that in the days of AI, it might be a little bit less relevant in terms of the type of output that you're getting, but I like more information than less. And I've been really happy with how they break out their information when you log into their platform. So that's why I chose to go with them. But again, a little bit more expensive. They are running a Black Friday deal. And I believe that this is the only time of year that they have a sale. 3x4 is another company that a lot of functional practitioners recommend. I think the output is a lot more digestible for someone who doesn't have a medical background. Every epigenetics report is going to provide you like a list of gene variants. So you can load that into a ChatGPT or AI platform and start asking it to dumb it down for you. What does this mean? You might also even be able to get some of this information through things like an ancestry report. If you did 23andMe before they went bankrupt, you just need the raw data file to be able to upload it to certain platforms. I don't know if AI will take certain of that raw data sets, but I know that other platforms exist out there to ingest that type of data to translate it in a way that feels actionable. As you can tell, this is an area that I've really rabbit holed into over the past year, and it's one that I've gotten really passionate about. And it's also really made me frustrated in terms of how things currently work with our healthcare system, which is really a reactive one. You don't get treated until something shows up, and there's not a lot of incentive around being proactive. To do what I'm talking about, you have to pay out of pocket for this. That's the reality of it. And in some ways, it feels like being on top of your health is something that people with money can do because these tests are not cheap. But I would prioritize going out to eat and certain activities to be able to afford this type of testing because I do think it's that important. Anyway, I would actually love to hear some feedback from you. Was this interesting at all? Definitely not flower content, definitely not strategy related content, but is this what you want to see more of? I already have Patreon health exclusives sprinkled out throughout some of my Patreon videos throughout the year, but if this seems to be of interest for others, I'm definitely happy to also sprinkle it through my YouTube videos throughout the year. So please let me know, and I hope everyone has a very happy holiday season. Cheers.